The storm outside had no fury compared to what raged inside Leonard's heart. Rain lashed against the hospital windows as thunder echoed like a warning, but the real storm was in the words he had heard. In that still bed, beneath the quiet hum of machines, Leonard lay frozen in more than just body. He had built a kingdom, yet now saw how empty his throne truly was. What he once thought was loyalty had revealed itself as greed. And just when he felt more invisible than ever, a gentle voice broke through the silence, and it wasn't the sound of wealth or duty. It was the sound of someone who actually cared. Leonard Grant had everything a man could ever want. A sprawling mansion overlooking the California coast, private jets that stood waiting for his next impulse, and a fortune built from decades of ruthless business moves. People called him a genius, a mogul, a self-made legend. But never once did they call him kind. On the morning of his 70th birthday, Leonard sat alone in his marble kitchen, staring at a slice of untouched cake. Not a single phone call from his children. No friends, just silence and a long list of people who respected him but never loved him. That silence followed him into the hospital a week later after he staged his own collapse during a charity gala. Doctors rushed him in, monitors beeped, machines buzzed. The official report said his condition was critical, unresponsive, but Leonard was fully aware. He had paid a select few to keep his secret. He wanted to observe. He wanted to listen, and he wanted the truth. The private suite he stayed in was elegant, clinical, cold. Expensive art hung on the walls, but no warmth lived in the space. His children visited once or twice, each time leaving with casual remarks about wills and properties. One son joked about selling the yacht. A daughter wondered aloud if they could put the mansion on the market before winter. No one cried. No one asked the doctor if he was in pain. Leonard heard every word, unable to flinch, unable to shout. Just still, powerless in a way he'd never known. Nurses came and went. Some barely looked at him. Others treated him like a task, a shift. And then one evening she appeared, young, maybe late 20s. Dark circles under tired eyes. She read his chart with a frown, but her hands were gentle. She adjusted his blanket. She wiped his brow. She sat beside him for a few seconds longer than necessary. Her presence was different. Her silence wasn't empty. It was respectful, human. She looked at his face as if he were more than a number on a board. And for the first time in decades, Leonard felt seen not as a billionaire, not as a figurehead, but as a person. In the stillness of that white room, something shifted. A seed was planted, one that would soon grow into something he never expected. The second evening brought a storm outside. Rain tapped steadily against the tall glass windows of Leonard's suite, while the world inside the hospital moved in quiet rhythm. Nurses pushed carts down silent halls. Machines hummed softly. Leonard lay there in the same still pose, his mind alert beneath the surface. He had listened to two doctors discussing his case in the morning, both more concerned with procedure and paperwork than the man in the bed. One of them even said it was a matter of time before the family pulled the plug, as if he were a failing machine and not a living soul. The words stung more than he expected. His children had come again that afternoon. Their voices were low, but not out of sorrow. His son asked the lawyer to check if the trust could be accessed sooner in case his father didn't recover. His daughter flipped through her phone as she sat beside him, barely glancing his way. One even asked if the antique cars could be transferred to her name now instead of later. Leonard listened in disbelief. These were the people he had built empires for. These were the ones he had given everything to. And now, at what they believed to be the end of his life, they showed no grief, just convenience, just calculation. It was more painful than the stillness he was faking, but once again, as night settled and staff changed shifts, the young nurse returned. Her name tag read Emily. She moved quietly, with care, almost as if trying not to disturb his thoughts. She brought in fresh flowers even though no one requested them. She replaced the water in his cup. She gently checked his Roman for and whispered soft reassurances, even though she thought he couldn't hear a thing. Her kindness wasn't loud, it wasn't meant for show, it was natural like sunlight coming through a window. That night she stayed a bit longer. Sitting by his side, she took a deep breath. Then, as if speaking to herself more than to him, she said that she didn't care who he was or how much money he had. Every patient deserved to be treated with dignity, that no one should feel alone, not even someone the world thought had everything. Her words sank deep into Leonard's heart. He had spent his life building walls. This woman, a stranger, was quietly tearing them down. Night after night, Leonard waited for Emily's voice. It had become the one constant in the spinning blur of time. The hospital staff rotated. Visitors came and went, but she returned each evening like clockwork. She would gently wipe his face, adjust his pillow, and speak softly as if he could understand her. She had no idea he heard every word. Her tone was never mechanical, never routine. It was full of quiet emotion, as if her care came from a place much deeper than duty. One particular night, the rain outside had stopped, but the silence inside felt heavier. Leonard heard her footsteps before she even entered the room. There was a slowness to them, a hesitation. She came in and dimmed the lights. Her hands moved slower than usual. He felt the coldness in the room had nothing to do with temperature. She placed a hand gently on his and stood there in stillness. Then she pulled the chair beside him and sat down with a quiet sigh that carried the weight of someone holding back tears. She leaned forward and spoke softly as if confessing to an old friend. She said that her mother was getting sicker and the medication she needed had tripled in price. The bills were rising, but her salary had not. She had considered quitting the job to take a higher paying position in another city, but something kept stopping her. She said she couldn't walk away from people like him, that even if he could not hear her, she believed in sitting by his side, that maybe kindness mattered most when it went unseen. Leonard felt something he hadn't felt in years stir inside him. Guilt maybe, or shame, or perhaps simply awakening. She had no idea who he really was. To her, he was just a fragile old man with no voice, yet she spoke to him like he mattered. She showed him care without expecting a reward. While his own family measured his worth in dollar signs, this stranger valued his presence. As she stood to leave, she gently touched his arm and whispered that she would be back tomorrow, that she hoped he wasn't in pain, that he wasn't alone. Leonard felt a tear form at the edge of his eye but couldn't let it fall. Not yet. Her words echoed long after she left, and for the first time in a long time he didn't feel like a number in a ledger. He felt like a life worth holding on to. The morning light crept in slowly through the tall windows of the hospital room, painting soft lines across the white sheets. It had been 3 long weeks since Leonard had slipped into silence, pretending to be unaware of the world around him. His body ached from the stillness, but his heart ached even more from everything he had heard. The whispers of betrayal from his own children, the empty routine of the staff, and the quiet devotion of one nurse had changed something inside him. Each day, he had grown more certain that the man he had been before needed to disappear. He had spent his life building empires, owning jets, sailing oceans, and closing deals worth millions. But no one ever held his hand just to offer comfort. No one ever stayed by his side without needing something in return, except her, Emily, the nurse with tired eyes and a golden heart. She had come every night without fail, speaking to him like a human, not a patient. And last night, he had made a decision. It was time to let the world know he was still here. As the morning settled and the hallway outside came alive with activity, Leonard waited. The door opened and his daughter entered first with a cup of coffee in one hand and her phone in the other. She barely glanced his way. His son followed, tapping away on a tablet, murmuring about legal documents. The room felt colder with them in it, but then Emily walked in, a gentle presence as always. She paused at the doorway, sensing something different. Maybe it was the quiet tension in the room. Maybe it was the way Leonard's breathing had changed ever so slightly. She walked closer, checked his pulse like she had done dozens of times before. And then it happened. Leonard opened his eyes, the room froze. His daughter gasped, his son dropped the tablet in shock. But Leonard didn't look at them. His tired eyes searched only for Emily. When they found her standing there motionless with tears forming in her eyes, he managed the first words he had spoken in weeks. Soft and sincere, he told her that she had saved him. Not the machines, not the treatments, not the money. Her. That single moment changed everything, not just for Leonard but for every soul in that room. Because for the first time in his life, he knew exactly what it meant to be alive. 1 month had passed since Leonard had opened his eyes and broken his silence. The world outside the hospital moved on as usual, but something inside Leonard had changed forever. He was no longer the same man who measured life by balance sheets and acquisitions. His days were now filled with quiet reflection and purpose. For weeks, he remained under care, slowly recovering, but not once did Emily miss a day to check on him. And even when her shift ended, she would come by just to talk, sit, or smile. She had no idea what she had started in him. After being discharged, Leonard vanished from the spotlight. The media speculated, the family remained silent, but Leonard was busy elsewhere. He had started working on something quietly without anyone's knowledge. Not even Emily knew what was coming. She returned to her small apartment each day, exhausted and worried. Her mother's condition had worsened, and expenses piled up faster than she could manage. But she kept showing up, kept giving her best to every patient without complaint. Her heart stayed soft even when the world around her felt sharp. Then one bright morning, as the sun poured over the city, Emily was called to a small neighborhood. She was told a medical facility had opened that needed her presence. Confused and cautious, she arrived in a taxi holding her worn-out bag and a skeptical heart. But what stood before her was something she could not have imagined. A brand new clinic sparkling with fresh paint and blooming flowers at the entrance. Above the door was a sign with her name on it. Emily Grace Family Health Center. She stood frozen, unable to move. Staff greeted her with wide smiles. A man handed her an envelope. Inside was a note, handwritten and brief. It said that kindness never goes unnoticed, and hearts like hers deserve to grow louder. It was signed simply with the name Leonard. Tears filled her eyes as she walked inside the building, now filled with new beds, new equipment, and hope. Every room carried the warmth she had given to others for years. Her mother would be treated here free of cost, along with hundreds of others who couldn't afford care elsewhere. She stood in the middle of it all, overwhelmed not by the size of the gift, but by the truth it carried. One act of quiet compassion had transformed a powerful life, and through that change it would now touch thousands more.